All right, good afternoon. It is Wednesday, 4 p.m. Central Time on the great day of August 25th. You know, I often say that I've made more bad choices and mistakes than just about any two people I know. And what we're going to talk about today is probably the result of one of the poorest choices I've ever made in my entire life. It's time to own the phone. Alrighty, hey, good day, good to see you here. Thanks for joining me. We're here for episode 16 of Own the Phone, and today we're going to talk about all the things that I've learned in life from the 366 days that I spent in the great city of Forest City, Arkansas at FCI Forest City. FCI stands for Federal Correctional Institute. So, they say in life, we'll laugh about this later. It took me a long while to be able to laugh about this, but I can laugh about some of the things now. But what I want to do today is kind of take you through what happened in my life from the time that I actually found out that I was having some issues with the government all the way through today, and the lessons that I learned. I kept a list here. I got about 10 things, at least lessons I want to cover with you. But I kind of want to share the story and just let you know what went through my head and what was happening at the time. And, again, hopefully inspire you to push through some of the tougher challenges that you're having in your life. And then also share some of the lessons that I've had. The comments are on. Love your comments. Love any questions you have. For those of you who are going to be watching this later, you're welcome to comment and ask any questions. I'll be able to circle back and answer them. But other than that, let's make it happen. So let's see here. 2005, 2006, if you remember the real estate market, everything was on fire. If you could fog a mirror, you could get a loan. It was a little crazy. And I decided I wanted to do some real estate investing to augment my income. And I connected with somebody that I knew from high school who was an LO for Countrywide. And, he had come by our office and talked about some of the programs that were out there. There were a lot of flexible mortgage programs back then. And so we connected, and he's like, hey, we can, go ahead and help people who are in distress. We can buy their houses from them. We can go ahead and rent them back to them, help them clear up their credit, help pay off bills, and then, sell their home back to them. And in theory, it seemed like it was going to work great. But the fact of the matter is that things didn't work out the way that they were planned. And, at some point, the gentleman, my former partner who was in charge of all the money, decided that he was going to stop paying mortgages on some of the houses, use some of the money for things he shouldn't have used it for. And, at one point I was like, hey man, I can't keep doing this. You've told my family, because I had family members involved, my mother, my brother, my father's best friend, my ex-wife's cousin. I mean, they were all involved as investors. And so, he basically stopped, sorry about that. He basically stopped paying the mortgages on most of my family members' houses. And I'm like, look, I got to go. Like, we're not keeping our promises to people. And so, I ended up losing pretty much everything at that point. Moved to Texas. Had to short sell my house. The bank, I remember the bank came and repoed my car in front of my house. I remember telling them, hey, can we just go down to the bottom of the hill and you guys can put it on the car back there, because I didn't, my ex-wife had a bunch of people over and didn't want them repoing my car. Well, she had friends over. It was a mess. And I moved to Texas in 2007, really with nothing. I mean, literally with nothing. And came here, had a job. I mean, there was a point, moved down here. I remember I had to borrow some money from my neighbor so I could take one of my kids to the doctor, because I just, I had blown through a ridiculous amount of cash and didn't do a very good job. And so let me think here. Moved to Texas, hadn't really heard anything, was working. My mother got cancer in fall of 2007. And then she passed away in June of 2008. And then in October of 2008, I got a phone call from my partner. He says, hey, the FBI wants to talk to us. And I was like, why would the FBI want to talk to us? And he said, well, it seems like there were some guys in Pennsylvania that were doing what we're doing, and they got in trouble, so they want to talk to us. So as you can imagine, when somebody says the FBI wants to talk to you, you do not curl up into a little ball and just ignore it. So I ended up running around, ended up having to find an attorney. My attorney did some research, and it they more than wanted to talk to us. They wanted to like throw the book at us pretty badly. And so that began, 2008 was really the beginning of the process of where, at the very beginning, and it took a long time for it to matriculate, but that was really the beginning of probably the six hardest years of my life. And so anyway, at this point, there's no way around it. And so, one of the lessons I've learned, and it's interesting because I think I posted this when I was advertising or letting you guys know about what's happening today, is that I used to watch Scared Straight and my kids watch it with me because I wanted them to see the consequences of bad decisions over and above the bad decisions their dad made. And the sheriff had a bunch of kids in front of him, and he said, it was really interesting. He said, repeat after me. He says, once you make a bad decision, the consequences are out of your control. And that's exactly what happened. I made some bad decisions. I wasn't necessarily trying to steal any money, but I saw things going on that I should have questioned, and I didn't question them. There were things that I ignored. There were things that I just looked the other way on. I made a lot of assumptions. I didn't do my own research to the extent that I could. So, I put myself in position for some things to happen, and they did. And so, I met with my attorney. He was a former prosecutor for the U.S. Attorney's Office. And remember, the United States has a 94% conviction rate on deals because, they're not going to come and find you until they know they have a case against you, and then they have deep pockets. They will not ever run out of money or time to prosecute you. So if you're going to go ahead and fight the government, you better have a really good chance of beating them think you have a good chance, because otherwise it's going to be bad. And so I remember sitting and talking with my attorney. The U.S. Attorney's Office sent over like more than a terabyte of data. My attorney went through it all at $250 an hour, 16 years ago or 13 years ago. And he's like, look, I don't really see that you did anything particularly wrong here, you personally, but here's the thing. If I missed a signature or I didn't see one piece of paper, or there's something here that we don't miss, and we go to court and fight it, it's going to cost you at least another $50,000 more than it's going to cost you now. And it ended up costing me, I think, around $60,000 or $75,000 anyway. But not only that, you're going to go to prison for 14 years. And I'm like, wow, okay, well, I can't let that happen. So it's like, what's your alternative? And I said, what's the alternative? He says, well, you can go ahead and plead guilty to 1 count of mail fraud, and you can help the government out, and then they'll be nicer to you. So, okay, I agreed to do that. He called the U.S. Attorney's Office. He said, okay, they're going to start off at 6 years. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah. He's like, we're talking $15 million worth of money here. This is not a small amount of money. We're looking at maximum of 6 years. They're going to ask for 6 years. I'm like, and I'm thinking about it. It's 2008. My oldest kid is 12 at the time. So I'm thinking if it gets wrapped up quickly, I'll be out after they graduate from high school. But if it doesn't get wrapped up quickly, who knows, right? And as it is, it took 5 years to find out exactly what my fate is. So anyway, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So, understanding that, when you make bad choices, the consequences are out of your control. I decided just to take it head on. And so I went back and forth to New Hampshire, and I want to share the story about my first visit with the FBI, because it was not, let's put it this way, TV doesn't do the process justice. They don't make decisions and figure things out right there in front of you like they do on Law and Order or any of those other shows. You make this deal, we'll do this for you. It's not anything like that. So I flew up to New Hampshire because I was living in Texas at the time. And there was, I still remember there was, back then, because of all the mortgage fraud cases and mail fraud cases and everything, they had the U.S. Postal inspectors involved because there were so many cases. So there was a U.S. Postal Inspector, U.S. Postal Inspector, FBI, U.S. Attorney, my attorney. So I'm sitting at this big table. I had gotten a bunch of water. I think I went through like 6 or 8 bottles of water in 3 hours. And so I sat down. And actually, one of the guys knew me because my dad was a letter carrier, and he was, from New Hampshire. So he knew my dad, which has made it even more shameful. So I sat down, and before they started talking to me, one of the postal inspectors looked at me and he said, he goes, hey, really sorry to hear about your mom died. I'm like, yeah, I really appreciate that. And he goes, is your brother still working at such and such a place in Tingsboro? I go, yeah, he still is. Okay, good. We saw that your sister lives here in Massachusetts, and how are her kids and family? I'm like, they're okay. Your aunt and uncle, they're doing okay. And so basically what they were saying to me is that we know everything about you. We know everything about the entire process. And so if you lie to us, you're screwed. And so they sat down and they said, okay, here's our proffer agreement. Proffer agreement basically you sign that says, hey, I'm going to tell you everything I know. I'm going to be completely honest with you, and you're going to give me a decent deal. And then, based on your cooperation, it could go down. But if you lie to us, we're putting 5 years onto whatever sentence you get. So makes it easy, right? So in addition to the, making bad choices and consequences and, whatnot, I also learned that honesty and integrity were probably more important than they'd ever been in my life. And up to that point in my life, I have to say that I was not a very honest person, not just with myself, but with a lot of other people. I may have mentioned this in one of the articles that I wrote on my page, but, I lied to my ex-wife about a cheeseburger once because I didn't want to fight with her. It got to the point where I would lie without even thinking about it. I would just say what I thought somebody wanted to hear. Literally, I would start telling the lie without thinking about it. And so for the next 3 hours, I had to be really deliberate of what was going to come out, about what was coming out of my mouth, because if I wasn't, I was screwed, and I really was screwed. And so they just started peppering me with questions, and I was, it was brutal. I mean, they literally hammered me, and they also told me how horrible I was and all the terrible things that happened. And so, there was no way around it. I mean, it's one of those things that you have to go through. So I went through it. They're like, okay, we're going to look at this. We'll get back to you. So I got from 14 years down to 6 years. Way better than 14, but 6 years away from your family, still not exciting. But so then I ended up flying back and forth, and met with them a bunch of times, told them everything that I knew. And so in April of 2011, now mind you, started in 2008. In April 2011, I hadn't formally pled guilty yet. So in April of 2011, I went back to the state of New Hampshire, stood in front of the federal judge who was handling my case, and I pled guilty to one count of mail fraud, which at that point made me, a convicted felon. Not convicted, but basically a convicted felon. And then I still had to wait until 2013, early 2013, to find out if I was going to prison or not. And so 5 years. Now imagine this. I had to wait 5 years to find out how long I was going to go to prison. And so, my weight ballooned up to about like 475. My relationship with my now ex-wife, was close to being over anyway. And then, I basically signed divorce paperwork before I left. And, after I testified against my former partner, and on September 3rd of 2013, pardon me, and then it's August. So in the late spring, early summer of 2013, I went back to court, and I had to finally, they call it an allocution letter. You got to stand up in front of everybody that's there. So there's reporters there from TV, from the newspaper, your family's there, other people were there. I had friends there, family there, and I had to stand up in front of the judge and accept responsibility for what I did. And so basically I prepared a speech thinking I was just going to read it, and I actually cried through the whole thing. It was mortifying. And, my parents were actually dead at this point, both of them. And I'm not saying I'm glad that they're gone, but I'm happy that they weren't there to see that, because that was probably the most, shameful thing I had ever had to experience at that point in my life, as a result of my actions. And so my aunt and uncle were there, my brother and some friends, and so I accepted responsibility for what I did. My attorney talked to the judge, and then the U.S. Attorney's Office went from 6 years down to 30 months, which is a little over 2.5 years. So they actually cut it in half and then a little bit more. So I was okay, not great, but now I'm at 2.5 years, and with statutory time, I'll get out hopefully in 2 years. And then the judge said, Mr. Bressler, up until this point in your life, you've been a good citizen, paying your taxes. You've been a good person. I got like 22 letters from people who I knew, who wrote nice things about me, in an effort to let the judge know that I wasn't some complete scumbag my whole life. And so I read all the letters. You've obviously been a good person. You've helped a lot of people. He says, but I can't, because of what's happening. He says, I can't let you just get home confinement, which other people who did what I did. But for me, every case is different. He says, I'm going to have to send you to prison. I'm going to give you 14 months in prison. So all in all, I got 14 years. So, whatever that is, times 1,240, and then another 2,464 months down to 14 months. So I got less than 10% of what I was looking at. So all in all, it turned out great. Now, when we walked out of there, my attorney had been saying all along, he says, if you do get something, it'll be right around a year. So he was right. He says, look, here's the deal. You're going to go there. You're going to get halfway home. You'll probably be out in 7 months. I'm like, okay, not horrible. But now, I have nothing. Okay. I have nothing. I turned everything over to my ex-wife. I had no money in the bank. And so I go to prison. So on September 3rd of 2013, a couple guys from church, very good friends of mine, we drove to Arkansas, had dinner on the 4th, And then on the 5th, they drove me to Forest City. There's a compound, there's a medium high security, then there's a low security, and then there's a camp. And I'll explain what the camp is in a minute, but you have no idea what you're getting into. I mean, it's federal prison. And as much reading as I did, I ordered a book on how to survive federal prison. And I did everything I could to understand. The fact of the matter is there's so many unknowns, you have no clue. So it's a very scary proposition. So, and it's interesting, I thought about it as I was going there. Like if I didn't have any kids and I wasn't married at the time, it would have been bad, just wouldn't have been as bad. But, I had 4 kids at home who I, ended up not seeing for a year. I was working with Jay Kinder and Michael Reese, and I was doing a lot of work and coaching for them. And I had to call my coaching clients and told them I was going to prison, that I was leaving. A really, really humbling experience, like really humbling experience. And the thing is, and that's the third thing, which is basically just owning it, I'm saying, and not being a victim and accepting responsibility for what I did. Part of me was like, hey, how am I going to tell my kids to accept responsibility for the decisions they make and to always tell the truth? And that when you tell the truth, usually the punishment is less, and in extreme cases, if you kill somebody, you tell the truth, you're probably still going to go to jail for life. You just might not be put to death. But in most cases, when you tell the truth, the penalty is not as bad. So, and in this case it was because I served less than 10%, or I got a 10. So it was less than 10% of where it started at. 14 months versus 14 years, like difference between throwing a bullet and shooting one. So it was for the first time in my life, I actually stopped being a victim and accepted responsibility for what happened. And I remember the day we drove up to the prison, I had a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, underpants. And then I had these shoes that I've been wearing forever. They were beat to crap. And, you guys, if you go look on the thumbnail for today's event or today's episode, you can see my ID. I put my ID from the first day that I got there. My hair was messy. It was all gray and dark, not pretty and dyed like it is now. And you can see I weighed I think I weighed about 475 pounds. I don't know, and I'll tell you that in a second. But we pulled up to the prison, and just as we get out of the car, we hear, "Get back in your car." I'm like, what? And then all of a sudden, I see 4 correctional officers with shotguns and a couple of people that were prisoners they were taking in what do you call it? In shackles, wrist, the whole thing, legs to into the prison. So I'm like, oh, well, welcome to prison. So I go in and give the guys a hug. And, it's funny. It was interesting because David Jordan, one of my buddies, he says, well, he says, I know it was tough, but he said, you took that like a man. You just walked in, said goodbye to us. And so I was like, well, probably the first time in my whole life that I'd taken anything like a man that I remember. So you go in, usual stuff, take all your clothes off, spread them, look at everything. They give me a pair of boxers and a t-shirt, and then they give me this one-piece suit that does not fit me. So it has the wooden zip because I was too fat. Gave me a pair of slippers, and I go in, and then you walk in, and basically the SEALs just drop you off into the barracks. There's no tour. Here's the bathroom. Here's the shower. Here's your bed. There's nothing. They just drop you off. And so they have these counselors there, and they use counselor in the very loosest of terms. He comes and sees me. Not a nice guy. Not meant to be a nice guy. He's not going to be your friend in most cases, right? He's there to discipline you. And so there's a thing called Skid Row when you get in, and there's a bunch of there's all bunk beds in here, right? So, and it's right out in the front where all the TVs are, where all the noise are, and you're going to spend the first couple of nights there because they have to assign you to a cell. So your first night, you're laying in a bed. The mattress is this thick. There's no pillows. You're wearing something that doesn't fit. Nobody cares. And, fortunately, some of the guys come up. The Christian guys are great. They gave everybody that comes in gets a bag with, it was really nice. They gave shower shoes and toiletries and stuff just to get you started. Some guys gave me a pair of shower shoes, and other guys gave me a pair of sneakers. The guys really cool, So from that standpoint, there were some nice guys there to help out. But you're on your own. And so first couple of days in Skid Row, I finally get put in with another guy. He was a pimp and a heroin dealer from St. Louis. His name was Frank. And we didn't get along. And if you don't get along with your cellie, then things happen. They usually get you out of there. So, we try and get into a routine, and because that's the best thing you do. Because if you think about how horrible it is there and when you're going to get out and how long it's going to be, it'll just eat you up. So, I lost, I think, here's the thing. I went to weigh myself because I didn't know how much I weighed. But the scale in the very small gym that they had there went up to 450. And when I stood on the scale, there were just 3 lines. So I think it was about 475, but it was a lot of freaking weight. And so the first month was probably the hardest because I had finally had to come to terms. It's almost like, And you've probably done this before. You've gone through a stressful period in your life and you're just kind of dealing with things, and all of a sudden things are over and you finally relax and you get sick, you get a cold or whatever. It's kind of like that. So I remember it's probably the second week I was there. I walked outside and everything just kind of hit me. And I remember falling to my knees and like crying, like in a field. I'm just like standing there in a field and bawling, and my guys are walking by and I just couldn't stop crying. And, some guy came and grabbed me and sat and talked to me, but it was like it was finally over, what I'm saying? Because it's almost like I held my breath for 5 years to find out what my fate was. And now I'm going to be away, and now I'm going to face all the shame and the guilt and the pain and process everything that I've been basically holding off. And so, anyway, the camp is 2 sets of barracks. There's, these, they're cinder blocks. They're about 6 feet high. There's 2 lockers. There's a little desk in between, and then space in between, and then a small desk with a chair, and then 2 bunk beds. And because I was bigger, I got to be in the bottom bunk. But so Frank and I didn't get along, and he went and told on me. And then they put me in this room. It was called the Fishbowl. It was like a 6-bedroom room, but not a great place to be, because the guys that were in that room were the guys that were bringing all the contraband to the prison. If you got caught in that room, guilt by association, you get sit down to the shoe, and then you're you're basically in solitary confinement for as long as they need to sort things out, which in many cases was months. So I didn't enjoy that at all, and I finally was able to get into a cell, if you will, a room with a guy who was nice, and he was there. I was with him for most of the time. Good guy. And so I ended up spending most of my time with the guys that were Christians there, played cards and everything. But it was interesting because, I had in my mind that I was going to be gone somewhere around June, right? October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June. That was 7-8 months. I thought I was going the halfway house. And the halfway house is just a transitional house there for when you get into prison to kind of get you back into the life. And so I was kind of had my mind focused on that. I do know that I lost roughly 100 pounds in the first 90 days there, because the food was horrible and I was depressed and sad and wasn't hungry, which I guess was a good thing, because I needed to lose a lot of weight. And when you're there, they have a requirement to give you like a certain number of calories a day. They're not required to serve you any quality of food, lots of beans. And for a while, nothing tasted good. So, it was tough. But then, you meet some people, you get into a groove and you hang out. I got a job washing tables in the cafeteria for 12 cents an hour, which was, interesting. And, and so you have a lot of time to yourself. Now, the camp is interesting because there's no fence around it. It's a complex. There's school. Some of the guys have to go to school because you have to work towards getting at least your GED if you're going to be there long enough. Everybody had to work. And so there were office buildings. There was a place to get a haircut. There was the nurse, and then there was the mess hall, a place where there was pool tables. There was a big track outside to walk on. There was a football field, and there were some weights and stuff. But, it's just, you can come and go as you please. You know what I'm saying? If you wanted to, you could walk right off. They would just say, okay, you left, and you get 5 years put on your what do you call it? On your sentence. But the worst thing about prison, other than not seeing your family, is that they really don't give a rat's butt for you, and you have no advocates there. So on the outside, you're innocent until proven guilty. You have an advocate, you have an attorney, you've got people to look out for you, to take care of you. On the inside, you have no advocates. The people that run the place really don't care about you, because, and I'm not trying to be a jerk, they just do not care. They're there. It's the best job in Forest City, Arkansas. Those people have minimum requirements as far as, education and things like that. And they just are there to keep you in line. They mostly treat you like an animal, most of them. They talk to you the way they want to. They can strip search you. They can check your blood alcohol level. They can do whatever they want to do while they're there. If they want, they can toss your room, throw everything apart to find stuff. So, and they'll yell at you. They'll scream at you. They'll degrade you. Even if you didn't do something wrong, if you're with somebody who did something wrong, they can put you in the special housing unit. Healthcare was terrible there. There were 5 guys that died in the year that I was there, and who all had diseases. Some of them had cancer that could have been treated, and their lives could have been prolonged. But basically, the Bureau of Prisons gets, I think, $47,000 a year for each prison from the government and other sources. And so they do the minimum they have to keep you there. Okay. You have to remember also, you're there with a bunch of convicted felons. 80% of the people that are there were there for drug charges. And, certainly didn't have a lot of common with them. White collar criminals represented the smallest amount. And you really have to be very, not only have to be people to trust here, you got to be careful you trust inside there too. I got taken advantage of sometimes for helping people out with money or food, and I had stuff stolen from me, and prisoners have an interesting code. You're not supposed to steal from other people. People steal, they lie, people pick fights with you. And it was funny because, you really have to mind your own business. You don't walk into somebody's room without asking them. You don't sit in their bed without asking them. You certainly don't put your shoes on their bed. Some people get really, there were fights there. There's all kinds of dumb stuff that happened. So you just got to kind of keep to your own and kind of get into a routine. So the other thing is, besides the consequences, not being a victim, honesty, integrity, and is number one, letting go and accepting the fact that you're someplace where you have really no control. You have no say over what you're going to do, no say over what's happening. Meaning the only thing you really get to do is come and go as you please between the hours of probably 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. And even at that, you can't go beyond the limits of the camp itself. And if somebody tells you have to do something, or if they want to do a count, or if they want to toss your room, or if they want to bust your chops, they can go and do that anytime they want to. And so you have to accept that, you're there, and then it's your fault that you're there. And that's it, and so people tried to pick fights with me. People would swear at me. And then, they called me a snitch because they thought I was a snitch. And I was actually probably the least likely to snitch on anybody because I wanted to keep to myself. I remember one night they came and tossed the fishbowl that I was in because one of the guys there who was right from the area was known for bringing tobacco, phones, cigarettes, all kinds of stuff into the prison, alcohol, food. I remember one night I walked to get up to go to the bathroom. I said a little later on, I got up to go to the bathroom and I saw them sitting there eating Burger King in a couple of big black duffel bags, and you just look the other way. You don't care. But they came to toss the room and they strip searched him, and then they left, and everybody thought that I had told on them. So people came over, they were screaming at me. They wanted to fight me. I mean, it was kind of scary. I mean, there's 80 guys there, 90 guys in there, maybe more. And half of them want to kick your ass, you know what I'm saying? And so it was a pretty crappy experience. And so anyway, I just, you get into a routine. I mean, just like life, you need to get into a routine. You got to get into, rituals and doing what you did. So I would get up in the morning and I would read, and then I started exercising every day, and I tried to play pool, and I learned helping people try to read. I mean, there were 50, 60-year-old guys there that could not read, and their goals, literally, one of the guys' goals, his name was Tim. He's from Louisiana. I said, "What are you going to do when you get out?" I says, "Well, I'm going to get on disability. And then my girlfriend and I are going to go and sell shrimp on the side of the road." Okay. 5 kids, nice guy, not a jerk, not a mean guy, but just, totally just happy to get out of prison and be taken care of by the government and not make any money. So, that's kind of what it's like. A lot of these guys had nothing to go back to. I mean, they've been dealing drugs since they were like 8, and, they were going back home, and that's why the recidivism rate is so high, because they just, they got nothing to go back to. So anyway, I started losing weight. I'm in the groove. And then I go in and meet with the lady who's responsible for getting your halfway house set up. And, there are people who have cancer that are happier than this woman. She was not a nice person, like, at all. Did not care about you, did not try hard to help you out, did not try hard to explain anything to you. So I put in for my halfway house. I'm expecting to get it June. Then the probation department goes to the house that I used to live in and says, talks to my ex-wife and wants to make sure the house is okay for me to go back to. And so she told them she didn't want me to come back to the house at the time. And so what happened is because I was from another state, I had to have an address to go back to in Texas. And because I didn't have an address, they had to resubmit my halfway house, which means my halfway house got taken away, which means I wasn't getting out of there in June. So it was a really bad day because I had kind of made my mind up that I was going to get out of there in June. And now I wasn't, and who knows when I was going to get out. I was going to get out, they give you statutory good time, which is about 85% or 15% off your sentence as long as you, behave yourself. So, the longest I would have been there was 366 days, but I'm thinking June, now it's July, August, September, I have like 3 or 4 months roughly that I've got to be there that I wasn't expecting to be there. And that sucks because you don't want to be there another second than you have to. And so I didn't really fight with, I sent Stacy a horrible, mean, nasty, one of the meanest emails I've ever written anybody. I apologize for it since. And I was in a bad place, you know what I'm saying? And so, I had to get to the point where I was going to accept what happened, and make sure I just got to the point where it was out of my control. And that was probably one of the biggest lessons I learned about accepting what needed to happen, because again, you have no control there, none whatsoever. And you will beat yourself up and cheer yourself up and burn yourself out if you actually just go ahead and don't feel like you're in control of anything there. So It took me a while, but I really learned it. The other thing is you have to learn how to get help from people. Like if you're there a long time, they give you the bigger, better jobs, and which they pay like $250 an hour. I'm saying, but if you work 40 hours a week, $250 an hour before taxes, you're still, after taxes, you're still looking at $70, $80 a week. And so, over the period of a month, that's a couple $100. You can buy a decent amount of commissary with that. You can buy good soap, good shampoo. You don't have to take the minimum requirement stuff they had there. So, but if you don't have that kind of a job, there were people there that had no money, zero money coming in, and they couldn't afford anything extra. And so, they'll give you shoes, they'll give you boots. They'll give you, the worst shoes, the worst shower shoes, the worst everything they can give you, because it's just basic requirements. But if you want good sneakers, if you want good underwear, if you want good t-shirts, if you want soap that actually lathers up and real shampoo, and if you want laundry detergent that will actually wash clothes and other stuff, then you need money, And so, one of the things you have to do is you have to humble yourself and get help from people. And, fortunately, I had people that were willing to help me and take care of me while I was in prison. And, they took really good care of me, and but I had to ask for it sometimes, and that's really hard. Hey, listen, I screwed up my life, and I'm in prison, and I made a lot of bad choices, and I left my family home and whatnot, and my kids were on welfare for a year with Stacy, and and you have to humble yourself to really ask for help, and so it's a hugely humbling experience, and I really had to accept that that's the way it was at the time. So anyway, it got to be the end of August. And, when you get a couple of weeks away from leaving, you start to really get nervous because you don't want somebody to screw it off for you. Like, guys do dumb things. Like, for instance, there's a really nice guy there. His name is Johnny, and super nice guy. I'm saying, just made a terrible decision, was in prison for like 7 years for stealing a bunch of money. But one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, like legitimately, not fake or anything. And, he used to get guys clothes ahead of time. You're not supposed to get the clothes ahead of time. You get the clothes after you go out. But he would get the guys' clothes ahead of time so they could change into them when they left. Well, he gave clothes to these two knuckleheads, and the guys are dressed in the clothes before they left. And they walked out to get released in these nice clothes. And I'm like, where'd you get those clothes? And, just idiots, just dummies. And that's why, same here. Like, we made bad decisions. People in prison make bad choices. They make bad decisions. That's what prison's there for, to help you pay for your bad decision and hopefully, reform you. So you don't want anybody to screw up your getting out. Like, literally, you could be in the room, you share a cell with somebody, your cellie, they call him your cellie, has tobacco. You both go down to the shoe until somebody admits it or they figure it out. Guys were gone for a month and they would come back like 30 pounds lighter because, you don't have access to anything but they give you for food, and it's the minimum requirement, and it's the worst of the worst. So not a good place to go. So had to really accept things as well, and be willing to accept help, and also use your time properly. So, I ended up getting out on September 6th of 2014, 366 days later. Same guys that dropped me off, picked me up. I left prison. They're like, go over to the main office and collect the money that was on your account. And so I went over and collected the money, and all of a sudden I heard a few coins hit the pan. I picked it up, so I had 54 cents. And so on September 6th of 2014, I had a pair of shorts, a pair of underwear, a t-shirt, a couple of pairs of socks, a pair of sneakers that were about a year old, a shower, like a laundry bag with some books in it, some magazines, and the things that were in a couple of boxes that I had packed before I left, and that's it, and some books. And, I lived with Jay Kinder, who was kind enough to let me live with him for a couple of months. I got my job back with these guys, but I had no money, no food, no clothes. They stopped at Walmart and bought me underwear on the way home. And I was literally starting from ground zero at the age of 46, and so the last thing I really learned is about making better decisions in life. I don't want anybody to have to go through what I went through. And I don't want everybody look, Tony Robbins talks about getting leverage, right? You got to get leverage in order to go ahead and make movement into your life so that you can make decisions. Sometimes you need to feel the pain, right? He says pain is more powerful a motivator than pleasure, right? We'll do more to avoid pain than we will to seek pleasure. And I don't want the worst to happen. I don't want you to get like I was, in 2019, 5 years later, where you wanted to put a gun in your mouth because, life was even worse then than it was in your prison, and I just, so it's about making better decisions, and, prison did for me what it was supposed to do. It was a deterrent. I'm saying, like, I make better decisions now. I read things before I sign them. I don't hang out with people I shouldn't hang out with. I don't spend time in relationships with people I shouldn't spend time in relationships with. You know what I mean? I don't do anything on the margin, you know what I'm saying? And I have no gray area left. So, it's just a matter of thinking about what you're going to do before you do it, make better decisions. And also taking advantage of the good things when they're there. I didn't see my kids for a year. My ex-wife would not bring the kids to come see me. So I didn't see them for 366 days. I came home and they all looked different. They were all a year older. They all looked different. They all grew. They were all taller, different haircuts. I mean, they looked like the same kids, but I missed an entire year of their life. My fault, not theirs. And, but I don't want you to have to lose everything like I did. I don't want you to get to the point where you're going to kill yourself. I don't want you to have to, I'm not saying go to prison, but the whole reason I'm telling you this today is that, you can learn the lessons you need to learn in life from the things that are happening or the things you experience from other people. I remember, I'll leave you with this. I went to UPW back in 2013, 12? No, it was before that. 2004. It was down in Miami, I think. And, you go to UPW, walk on hot coals. And so Tony does this whole thing to get you ready. And he looks at me and he says, listen, here's the deal. He says this afterwards. He said at that time. He said, look, he says, one thing you need to know is you don't need to burn your foot to know that you walked on hot coals, meaning you don't need to suffer or be in a truckload of pain to know that you've gone through some tough times and have come out on the other side. Okay. And it was interesting because when I walked on hot coals the first time, I was totally in state walking across the hot coals. And then I got to the end and they stopped me and got me out of my state and my heel was still on a coal and I actually got burned. So it was interesting, but right. You don't need to have horrible things to happen. You don't need to have scars and bruises and all this other stuff in order to make good decisions in life, And so let me just revisit this here. First thing is you make decisions. There's consequences with every decision. There's also consequences with every piece of indecision, right? At some point in our life, we're all victims, but as soon as we realize that we were victimized, it's now our responsibility to fix it. I've shared Will Smith's video about responsibility and fault, okay? Most of us, it's not our fault how we got here, but it is our responsibility to fix it and make it better. Live your life with honesty, integrity always, as painful as it is, right? You may have to go to somebody and tell them something that's probably going to end your relationship with them, but you owe it to yourself and them to be honest with them and then have enough integrity to never do it again. Letting go of things and accepting that things are going to happen. You can squeeze something as tight as you want, but as soon as you let it go, it's going to go away anyway, right? Some things are just out of our control. In fact, the only thing that's in control, and Cliff Freeman says this, right, the 5.5 inches between our two ears. That's it. That's the only thing we're in control of. And if we take control of that, things are going to be great. And just accepting what's going on. The other thing is sometimes we're the helped and sometimes we're the helper. It's okay to get help. Vulnerability is strong. Asking for help is actually a strong thing. It's not a weak thing. Makes you a better person. Use your time wisely. You never know what you're going to have. I mean, just imagine not seeing anybody in your family for a year. Not one person in my family came to visit me in a year. Not my fault. I'm saying I was the one in prison, not them. So, and then just make really good choices, and make sure you make good choices, going forward. Anyway, I want to share this with you. There's lots of good lessons. Hopefully you got something from this today. There's all kinds of other stuff with shock value. I just could tell you, but I didn't think it was good value, but I just want you to live a good life. I want good things to happen to you, and I don't want you to have to go through what I went through in order to make good things happen for you. So hopefully you'll enjoy this. I'd love to hear your feedback on it. Let me know what you think. And, if you have any questions, be happy to let you know. Other than that, as I always say, my name's Wally Bressler, and this has been On the Phone.
Hey there, this is Wally Bressler, and on behalf of my guest... Hey there, this is Wally Bressler, and on behalf of my guest today, I'd like to thank you for joining us for this episode of On the Phone. If you'd like more information on how to overcome sales call reluctance, procrastination, and self-sabotage, and become an expert on the phone, go to www.phonesalessecrets.com. And if you'd like my free course on how to overcome sales call reluctance, please go to www